All right, wonderful people. This is the WayFinder podcast number two. And today's date is April 12th, 2020. Happy Easter. It's a Sunday. I hope you enjoyed last week's podcast and hope you enjoyed this week's one as well. Like I began last time, I'm going to begin with a poem this time. And today's poem is a masterpiece, one of my favorites. It's by Carl Sandburg, and it's called Chicago. And it's written during the Chicago Renaissance that happened. So in the 30s, 40s, I'm really exploring that period, and there was a lot of African American poets in that time, and this poem is just it signifies what I see America as, right? It's sort of the best of America in my opinion, because America is, as I see it, is very blue collar in terms of like feet on the ground, virtue ethics in terms of like be good to your neighbor, good to your family, be good to your community, and then it's also beautiful. It's a beautiful poem, and I see that America has sort of like really high aesthetics and really high values, and that's sort of what Chicago is, right? Chicago is sort of like a blue collar town, but also it's where there's a really phenomenal architect that's from the some and I don't remember his name right now, but the architecture there is beautiful, but it's also a very blue collar sort of city at the same time, and this poem sort of captures that. That's sort of what I see America as, and sort of like my vision of America, and sort of want to get us back there again. Uh, I don't want to do it alone. I can't do it alone, but I'm gonna do my best to add to that, to sort of take us back to feet on the ground values. Anyways, this is Chicago by Carl Sandburg. Uh, Chicago, hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads and the nation's freight handler, stormy, husky, brawling, city of the big shoulders. They tell me you are wicked, and I believe them, for I've seen your painted women under the gas lamps, luring the farm boys. And they tell me you are crooked, and I answer, yes, it is true. I have seen the gunman kill and go free to kill again. And they tell me you are brutal, and my reply is, on the faces of women and children I have seen the marks of wanton hunger. And I haven't answered, so I turn once more to those who snare this my city, and I give them back the snare, and say to them, come and show me another city with lifted heads, singing so proud to be alive, and coarse and strong and cunning, flinging magnetic curses amid the toil of piling job on job. Here is a tall, bold slugger set vivid against the little soft cities, fierce as a dog with tongue lapping for action, cunning as a savage pitted against the wilderness, bareheaded, shoveling, wrecking, planning, building, breaking, rebuilding. Under the smoke, dust all over his mouth, laughing with white teeth, under this terrible burden of destiny, laughing as a young man laughs, laughing even as an ignorant fighter who has never lost a battle, bragging and laughing. And under his wrist is the pulse, and under his ribs the heart of the people, laughing, laughing the stormy, husky, brawling laughter of youth, half naked, sweating, proud to be hog butcher, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads and freight handlers of the nation. Ah, whoo! That was Chicago by Carl Sandburg, and like I said, if you feel the sort of blue collar ethos in that, right? But again, written with sort of the fervor of and the beauty that sort of like is American, and that's what today's episode is really going to be about, right? I'm going to sort of just to explain how I see the American spirit, and sort of how that sort of is fueled by highfalutin highfalutin values, right? Because again, this country it got some high standards, right? But again, it's high standards implemented by people with feet on the ground, right? Because again, like America is partly wilderness culture, and partly by wilderness culture I mean it's pioneer culture. It's like it's your it's development and entrepreneurship and sort of like building and sort of leading the way forward. But it's also sort of weird, grounded, like I don't know, British highfalutin, like cultured. It's interesting, right? It's really fascinating. So on that note, the second poem I'm going to read is "To Milton" by William Wordsworth, and it's sort of an ode to Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost, and it's quite phenomenal because it's sort of I love Renaissance periods and sort of periods of revolution and rebirth and rebellion, right? Because they show us we have during times like that we have the opportunity to rise to our best selves, because I don't know, regular life is very, I don't know, it's not mundane. It's quite beautiful, and I love the sort of the serenity and the peace of it, but times of upheaval give us the opportunity to rise, right? Because I mean, would Achilles have been Achilles without the Great War of Troy, right? Like I don't know, would Churchill have been Churchill without the? But again, like I don't like that because again, World War II, we had death upon death, millions upon millions of death. But again, times of chaos and turmoil give us the opportunity to make a choice. And right now we're living sort of in a time of chaos and turmoil, right? We have a Trump presidency. We have sort of what happened in England with Brexit. And again, I don't know if that's for better or worse. I don't know. And you have like I don't know autocrats all over the world, and we're living in a time of great upheaval, right? Which is fantastic, and we have a choice. We can choose how to stare it. And this poem by Wordsworth called to Milton as sort of it harkens back to days gone by of men of character, men and women of character who sort of stood up, right, and said, he said, I see upheaval, I see chaos, but I'm gonna have fortitude in the face of adversity. I'm gonna have fortitude in the face of chaos, which is courage in the face of pain and adversity, and that says something, right? And I sort of want to lead that charge, but again, I'm just a guy with a podcast, kind of talking into the wilderness, and it's kind of fun. I do kind of enjoy that, but eventually I want to talk to the people, right? I don't want to just talk to the wilderness, because again, we are the change we can see in this world, right? And I kind of want to Spurs to be that again. But yeah, this is to Milton. Milton, thou shouldst be living at this hour. England had need of thee. She is a fen of stagnant waters, altar, sword, and pen. Fireside, the heroic wealth of hall and bower have fortified their ancient England dower of inward happiness. We are selfish men. Oh, raise us up, return to us again, and give us manners, virtue, freedom, power. Thy soul was like a star and dwelt apart. Thou hast a voice whose sound was like the sea, pure as the naked heavens, majestic, free. So didst thou travel on life's common way in cheerful godliness, and yet thy heart the lowliest duties on herself did lay. Wow, and that's quite phenomenal, right? So you have what Wordsworth is basically saying. We need a time where we need a champion, right? And I don't know, like so back in so what I'm gonna do today, I'm sort of gonna walk us through making history. And there were times really gonna highlight the times that we had champions, and the reason why I really love that Sandburg poem and sort of coupling it with the Milton poem is that American history has sort of been decried by Americans as atrocity upon atrocity. And you know what? That's human history, right? That's sort of the story of man, and why I love America so much is that there have been during periods of great upheaval, there have been champions, men and women of courage and character who stood up and for a second, or a second in the grand scheme of reality, there was a shining moment. There've been shining moments in American history, and I'm sort of going to highlight those today. Please feel free to comment and discuss about the sort of the atrocities I missed, and we can discuss them. But there's too much talk of sort of the venality that is America, and I think we need to hear the other side of the story, and it takes an outsider, right? Because I wasn't born here, but I've come to love this country as my own, and it would be a disservice if I don't share. Sort of the wonders and sort of why I chose this country of all of my many options, right? Because again, that's so. Yeah, before I move into the actual meat and potatoes of the podcast, America is so awesome that if you don't like it here, right? You have an American passport. Most people in the world would die to have an American passport, so you can leave. You can just like walk your way out here. And if you're not gonna walk your way out, but you're gonna complain, why not help us fix it, right? All right. So sort of so the this podcast is really uh, uh, so last time I talked about sort of how I see society and culture. I sort of gave my spiel on sort of the separation of culture and all cultures really, and I sort of endorsed certain offices, different people for different offices from the local level, from making all the way to the national level. I endorsed Bernie, but unfortunately Bernie's out of the race, and we're left with Biden. And it'll be interesting to see how Joe Biden goes against Donald Trump, because again, I have registered as a Democrat, so I'm officially a Democrat. But I don't. Biden doesn't seem to be someone that I feel like I can put my faith in, which is interesting though, because Barack, one of my recent presidents, really put his trust in him, because again he made him his number two. So maybe there's something to Biden that we haven't seen yet. Maybe he'll show us some character. It's worth waiting for, right? I think it's worth giving people a fair shake, and yeah, I'll give Biden a fair shake. Okay, so one thing I really did spend time though emphasizing was the legislature. That's the House of Representatives and the Senate, and I endorsed a couple people for that from Georgia. And again, over the course of since then, we've disagreed on certain things, and that's fine. I still want them there because we as Democrats, we need to become better politicians in the sense that why I do not agree with Teresa Tomlinson and Shane Hazel on quite a few things actually. I do want to play the game, and I choose them over Purdue and the other like Republicans. So there's that. So this week, I'm really going to delve into why I think the legislature is so important, and what should really influence the law, right? So the legislature is important for many reasons, right? They set laws and policy, and that's great power, right? Because again, if you have the law on your side, you basically have the authority. Because again, the state has a monopoly on violence, or at least they should, right? Which means that and that monopoly on violence allows them to enforce the law. So if they make a law and you break it, they can put you in jail, right? That's an immense power right there. And that's, well, in a nutshell, that's why it's the most important, right? But I'm going to really go into the law and sort of what guides the law, and I'm going to call that a spirit of the law, which is highly influenced by the culture. So today's going to be fun because we're going to do a little bit of American history, which I really love because again, history is just stories that really did in fact happen, right? With various degrees of credit of rectitude, right? Because again, the past is quite opaque, and who knows what the key event was, right? So there's this interesting I think analogy. I don't know what it is. It's like in a battle, right? So you have like a battle going on. Like who really makes the decisive choice? Is it like the individual soldier kicking ass on the field? Is it the general the plan? Like what is the quote unquote haymaker, right? And it's hard to sort of dissect history that way, and for that reason it's fun to look at, right? And that thus history shouldn't be sort of the way looking retrospectively shouldn't sort of be how we sort of like determine truth, but it should give us ideas. I get a lot of ideas from history, but I don't use it as my metric for truth. I sort of like I prefer perspective, right? So by perspective I mean I make a hypothesis moving forward in time, and I see if the results moving forward, because again, moving forward in time you can sort of like decide what the relevant evidence to capture is, and then you can then test it against your hypothesis, right? And that's way more rigorous, right, than looking back in time, because looking back in time, you know you really know what happened, right? So there's that. Okay, so before so that's sort of what we're going to go over today. Fantastic. Aha. So what's the current state of play? So I think the current state of play is this, right? It appears that with the legislature, we really forgotten how powerful the law is, right? Because it really is end all be all, right? Like without laws make a nation, right? And laws really make a nation sovereign from other nations, right? And again, because laws control border control. I don't know what you do with your body, what your family can do. I mean, like tax codes, the laws control a whole lot of things, right? The laws allowed slavery to continue for a while. The laws allowed the laws like have led to a lot of atrocity, and so the laws are really really quite important, and we've sort of forgotten that the purpose of the law, and right now it seems from my purview, again I'm no expert, but I want to become one because I do want to play a role in sort of our national sort of government, and the way I think it works is that the legislature, the national legislature at least, has forgotten that their role really isn't to support their candidate all the time or oppose the opponent. So that's like what the Republicans did when Barack Obama was president. Right? What they did is that Obama had somebody for the Supreme Court. And they're like, nope. They just arbitrarily oppose his ideas, and then Obamacare. I'm going to look more into that, but they seem to arbitrarily oppose him because he was from the other side, and that's not the point of legislature. That's what children do, and that's sort of why I'm sort of like on a campaign to oust the current Republicans in the Southeast region, because again, one, they're cowards, and two, they seem to just they're playing the game like children. Okay, and I hope that when in fact a Democratic group gets into the legislature, we don't act the same way, right? The buck should stop at us, right? And so that's partly why I'm doing all this, is that I don't know, I want to infuse a certain I don't know, certain maturity into the whole game. Again, I think we need that. Yeah, and so feeding off of that point, the key sort of point of the legislature is it's really not to push a progressive or conservative agenda. It really is to protect the shared vision of this country, right? So again, America, like fundamentally, right? I mean, the reason why, and I'm going to go into this in more detail, but this country really is about standing up against tyranny of the minority and tyranny of the majority, right? It's like this country really is about sort of like making sure that nobody becomes a tyrant, right? Nobody has too much power over anybody else, right? And sort of protecting, and it's about sort of trying to provide life, liberty, and the opportunity for pursuing whatever you deem to be your quote unquote happiness without in fact imposing on somebody else, right? That's the legislature plays a delicate game, right, of balancing all those things out, right? Because what is life? You know, what leads to life? What how do you preserve liberty? How do you sort of enhance somebody's liberty without sort of taking away from somebody else's liberty? Right? Is it a zero sum game? Is it a, you know? So they have a high obligation, right? And so we need to hold them to a really high standard, right? Because again, they have a lot of power and they have a lot of authority, right? And that's and they also sort of dictate our sort of like our role with the rest of the world, right? So just as an aside before I move on, right? If the legislature, I don't know, again, World War II is something I don't know quite as much about, like, that I want to, but imagine if America had gotten involved in the war effort before Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor probably wouldn't have happened. The war probably have ended much swiftly, right? And again, and I don't know if FDR said let's go to war, and then the Senate, because again the Senate can repeal, the Senate can choose not to fight the war, right? And they were probably they were actually not probably, they were definitely Nazi sympathizers in the Senate, because again it was in the 40s, and we had the Ku Klux Klan, and then a lot of Jim Crow, and people were against sort of like people who were very bigoted, right? So again, the legislature, guys, men and women, boys and girls, the legislature, we should, because it's key, right? Because again, I don't know if FDR like said let's go to war, and then the Senate was like, yeah, no, man, we don't need to fight that war, right? And then Pearl Harbor happens, and then we go, okay, you know. And but again, that was a just war that we should have gotten into way sooner. And the Senate can actually, I don't know if the Senate can declare war, but I'm pretty sure that they approve, right? Or they can lobby the executive, right? Because that was a war that we should have gotten into earlier. But anyways. Hey, so just, and it seems like, yeah, and I think my hypothesis is that so why I'm going to tackle the spirit of the law today is because my hypothesis is that I think we've forgotten what the laws are built on. Right? The laws are built on. So there's a great book that I'm going to read and I recommend. It's by Oliver Wendell Holmes, and it's called The Common Law. And he sort of goes into sort of how the law emerges. And there's a great line in there. It says the law is not sort of, I'm paraphrasing, but the law isn't built on logic and highfalutin philosophy, right? It's built on experience, right? So through the history of man, and that's the American law system sort of is built from the British common law system, which sort of emerged from the bottom up, right? So people have to live with each other, and and the question is, okay, how then should we cooperate with each other and live with each other, and that sort of lets the laws emerge, and I think we've forgotten what in fact the laws are built on. And I'm going to go into that today, from my perspective and how I see that, because again, but again, pulling on vast amount of resources that I sort of have. And the final point I really want to make is that I'm gonna really try and make a distinction between what I see as the government and the society, right? The government obviously is chosen. The people in the government are chosen from the society. But when they do that, we're really giving them special privileges, right? Because again, I don't have an army, you don't have an army, right? But they have an army, right? I don't have a police force, they have a police force, right? And so we're basically giving. I don't have I don't know, $300 in budget. They do, right? And so when we elect a government, we're basically giving these people a lot of power and authority, and they said, and I don't have a court, I don't have a justice system, I don't have a jail. Okay, and that's it. We as individuals, we don't have much. We have each other, and we sort of have the laws that let the government not tyrannize us, and not tyrannize each other. And we have our businesses, and we have our savings accounts, and we have our, we have our stuff, right? And we have our people, but we don't have as much resources as the government has. So what we do is that we're giving them special. We're making them kings and queens, at least the executives. We're making them kings and queens for a period of time, a brief period of time, right? And that comes with certain obligations, rights, and luxuries, right? And we should understand that they are extra societal, like they really are extra societal, right? and that's why we should put their feet to the fire, right? And that's why we citizens have to be sort of educated and on the money, right? I'm not saying you should pay attention to the news 24/7. Actually, please don't pay attention to the news 24/7. Just be aware of what's going on. Know how much information you actually do need, and then understand how you filter that. That goes back to the past episode, right? And really develop your own sense making apparatus, right? And be able to understand the general sense making apparatus, right? Be aware. Be aware. You don't have to be hyper informed, but you need to be hyper aware, because uh, things can get, I don't know. Don't let the wool be put over your eye, essentially. Okay, so that's the sort of the current set of plays. I think we've forgotten what the law is built on, and that's what I'm going to go into today. Okay, so here we are. All right, so understanding that, so this is just to read the sort of the caption is out of this figure is understanding that the law, actually the letter of the law, which is the quote unquote the constitution, which is national law and state laws, they lag the spirit of the law. And what is the spirit of the law, right? It sounds very esoteric and very metaphysical, right? But it kind of is, right? Uh, so I think the spirit of the law is what I call the spirit of the union, right? And I'm going to go into that in more detail. But this is how I see America as being structured, right? This figure right here is America in my view. We the people, and then we have the culture, which is this. It's I don't know. It's the air we breathe, right? It's the ether. It's just there. It's the culture. We get it through our, I don't know, media sources, through interaction with family, friends, teachers, everybody, right? And that's the culture. It's the air we breathe. Because I mean, there's a really phenomenal quote that says that man doesn't live by bread alone, and it doesn't, right? We live by sort of like the spirit. Oh, we live by more than that. We consume media, and that affects how our mind works. It affects how we see the world, right? And if you and if you sort of don't inhabit your culture, then you're sort of blind to the realities going on around you. It's a great book I'm reading right now. It's called Americana by Chimamanda Adichie. And she when her lead character sort of like spends time in American culture, starts to read and digest the media, it's like the walls pulled over her eyes, like the scales lifted, and she sees America anew. She actually understands how people are behaving and why that's happening, and that's what I wish for everybody is that spend time in the culture of the union. I'm not calling it the United States of America because I don't know, that term is sort of, I don't know, sort of vague. I like the union better because again that's what we are. We are the union, right? I guess again what Mexico is, and their states in the Americas, right? Yeah, but the Union means something. The Union is what won the war, right? The Great War, the first, in my opinion, really great war that America really had. Second Great War that America really had. It wasn't the Second Great War though, but you know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, so we the people and the government sort of shape the culture. I think, and at the end of this, I'll tell you sort of who has the highest obligation in the culture, just as a preview. It's really your entertainers, right? Because that's where we get our culture from, right? So just as an aside, people sort of treat Shakespeare now like Shakespeare is like, like high culture, but Shakespeare actually wrote for like the people, right? Like he wrote for the people, and like he wrote to be an entertainer, and obviously the man's brilliant. Whoever it was is brilliant, and and thus he becomes part of the culture, he becomes part of the canon, and it's like, oh wow, and then we teach it like, and then we sort of ruin it by teaching Shakespeare like he's like it's like, I don't know, like it's a law. It's not law. Like it became part of what we are because we loved it so much, right? If you don't like Shakespeare as much, find what you love, right? And hope that it's, and there's a word that I've been using a lot lately. It's by Nassim Taleb, well, introduced to me by Nassim Taleb, and it's Lindy, and essentially what it means is that read the things that make up the culture really, and the things that last the test of time, right? So Shakespeare is Lindy. He lasted the test of time, right? No offense, you're like your Kardashians. I think they're fast burning stars that are not gonna last beyond their time. I don't think they are. But again, that's me. That's a projection, right? That's a hypothesis. We'll see if I'm wrong. Okay, so we the people and the government make up the culture of the union, and that sort of, and the culture of the union sort of motivates the spirit of the union, right? Because again, people will say about Americans that, oh, we're very like proud, and like, you know what, we're not very proud because of some arbitrary reasons. We're proud because yes, we've done some really stupid things and really bad things, but we've also stood up for some really really good things, right? We're sort of like, I mean, we're the small colony of 13 sort of small states that stood up to the biggest empire in the world and won. It doesn't fill you up with pride. I don't know, because hey, people like when they're an underdog, when your soccer team like is an underdog and they beat like the big dogs, you get really excited, and that basically was that. But except it's actually mattered on a global scale, right? So the trajectory of the world changed when that war happened, right? The trajectory of the world changed drastically, and that means something. Okay, so there's that. And then so that spirit, right, that says that don't tread on me, right? We're gonna don't tread on me. Essentially, is the American spirit, and then the spirit of discovery, right? You know, that's what sort of informs the law, right? The law is like that's why the sort of that's why the Bill of Rights are there, right? And the first one is free speech, you know, freedom of press, like, you know, freedom of to gather, freedom of religion, you know, all these things, right? It's those are says that nobody can really impose on you unless obviously you're imposing somebody else, right? And then the freedom to bear arms, all these things, right? It's like that's what motivates that, right? It's sort of this ethos of, hey, don't tread on me, right? And so that's the ethos. Don't tread on me. And America sort of has an entrepreneurship streak, right? And that's sort of fueled by its other side, which is very exploratory, right? So you have those two things that fuel the letter of the law, and then from the letter of the law, which is the actual text of the law, which is can be imposed by an army and a military and sort of like a local police force, right? Are the obligations and then the rights and the laws. And what's cool about obligations, rights, and laws? Sorry, that's wrong. I'll change later. It should be obligations, rights, and luxuries. So the good thing about obligations, rights, and luxuries is that the government has certain luxuries. Again, they have an army, and then but that with that comes certain rights, and rights means that they have some freedoms, and you know they can spy on you, they can spy on other people. But they have certain obligations, which means that there's some things that they absolutely have to do, right? And then we the people, again, because we get to have the protection of the government, we get to choose who they are. We have all these things. We have certain obligations that we have to meet. The least of those being pay our taxes and vote. There are other obligations we have besides those, and then we have certain freedoms and rights, and then we have certain things that are luxuries. Okay, so let's get into that. All right, so now we get into the sort of the next thing, which is like this is the real sort of the real, and this I apologize. I'm just getting used to this podcasting thing, or just recording myself speak, and so I may speak a little too quickly. I may get lost in maybe a lot of sides, but essentially, this is sort of the where I'm trying to get to with this episode is this the spirit of the union, and sort of informed by the history of the union, right? So I keep calling the union. The union didn't start until much later, but I like that. I like calling the union because it's very distinct, as opposed to I don't know, because the United States of America is, I don't know, it's kind of a I don't like it as a name. I like the union as a name, so I'm gonna use that. But what's even more interesting before I even delve into the history of the union, and again, the history informs the spirit of the union, because again, if you have to say what you are all the time, right, then you are not what you are, right? So essentially, what I'm going to do is this is like a show and tell. Right? I'm going to show the American spirit, right? As opposed to like say, oh, I've said it already. I've said the American spirit is standing up to tyranny and bullies, right? And that's all well and good, right? But has America actually lived up to it? And that's sort of the question of the slide is I'm gonna do my best to show how America has lived up to the fact that it's not always the bully, that sometimes it's stood up to bullies, right? And it's fought for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and it's actually stood up to tyranny. So yeah, so before we move on, just an aside, and it's actually a very important point, but for this episode, it's sort of an aside. The side is this: America as a nation is not. It's a confederation, right? It's a federation of many states, right? It's again, each state does it different. I talked about this in the previous slide, sort of how like why I don't think Bernie's ideas will like work as well, right? Because again, we always cite the sort of the northern like socialist Democrats, and we go, why can't we do that here? Well, the reason that we can't do that here is that Wordsworth they're distinct regions of America, and within those regions, they're distinct states, right, with distinct people of different distinct cultures. But again, it's e pluribus unum, right? It's out of many one, out of one many. I don't know. It's saying that while we are one nation that says no to tyranny, which means that we're not going to tyrannize each other, right? Which means that if you're in Seattle and you're like pro, I don't know, pro, let's say pro abortion, right? You can't impose that on us in Georgia if we're anti-abortion, right? And again, this is my podcast. I am anti-abortion for many reasons I won't get into today. But again, I'm anti that. And, I will make it difficult to happen. But again, if I lose the vote in sort of our legal system, then yes, I've lost the vote, and I can respect that because I'm an adult. But again, I'm going to fight against it. And if I win, you have to respect it as well. And if you want to have your abortion or do whatever you want, you can leave. You can go live somewhere else. You can go be part of somewhere else. And that's the beauty of this nation, right? Is that if you don't like the way it's being done somewhere, and I don't know, and you've tried to change it and you've done your best and you haven't lost and you've lost, you have options, right? You can go, you can move around. You can so that's the Southeast is seen as typically very conservative. Yeah, kind of is the price to conservatism, and the Northwest is seen as progressive, and they're press to progressivism, and the legislature is supposed to help us, and our good leaders are supposed to help us balance between the two, right? Because again, I'm not saying we have to have middle grounds all the time, but there's a time where we need middle ground, right? So that's that. Okay, so let's get into the shared spirit of America, right? So yes, like I said, the Northwest is a little different from the Southeast, but there is a defining spirit, right? And I think that the spirit begins the Mayflower. So the Mayflower was a ship of pilgrims that left England and during some sort of religious conflict, and they were being tyrannized for practicing their faith in a particular way that they chose. And so they left, and they made the Mayflower Pact in Pennsylvania, somewhere in the northeast. And they basically they flee to tyranny, and when they came in, they sort of decided not to do that to one another, right? And that's sort of the beginning of what I see as America. America is just people who escaped sort of the tyranny of the old world, and for me, the old world is still with us, right? Anywhere that tyranny and sort of so again, North Korea exists in 21st century, so we're not quite there yet, we're not quite where we need to be, right? And there are other nations in this world, all over the globe that sort of tyrannizes their population, right? The biggest example right now is, for better or worse, right? They might have fancy technology, but China again is it's pretty bad. It's pretty old world, right? It's pretty old world, which is very fascinating, right? So which means that again, back to the center lab, right? No progress without civilization, right? And I think America represents the pinnacle of civilization. Again, we want to have the nicest stuff all the time, but we take care of our own in the sense that we're again not perfectly, but we do value the fact that we won't tyrannize you. And although it's not a perfect system, it's getting there, right? And it's not because of quote unquote enlightenment, but something beyond that, which is just a simple understanding that says that you are a human being and I'm a human being. Yes, informed by the Enlightenment, but it didn't begin with the Enlightenment. It began much earlier, right? It began much earlier. I think the Enlightenment sort of tacked onto that idea, and again, why I don't like the Enlightenment is that it's a bit of hubris there. They say, "Oh, we're bringing the light," right? There've been many Renaissances and many sort of, and even the Renaissance, right? There's a little bit of hubris there that says, "Oh, this is the Renaissance," right? It's like, nah. There've been many rebirths, many Renaissance, many revolutions, many rebellions over the course of human history, right? And to sort of see one as the pinnacle of that is foolish. So Mayflower is the beginning. And then stuff happens in between, which I need to look more into, right? And then sort of the war, the signal fire, sort of that etches this sort of ethos into stone, right? So again, it was sort of generally agreed that's what America was, right? Sort of this bunch of brigands who were doing their thing in the new country, right? The new world. But again, the King George sort of chooses to not be a bully, right, to the colonies, and when that happens, the leaders, the legislature, right, because again, not the governors didn't weren't the ones that declared wars. The governors sent legislatures to meet at the first in Congress, right, and then these brave men and women too, right, decided that they were going to band together and that they were going to declare war against the greatest empire in the world. But they had a small army. Obviously, they had help from the French, from allies, but they basically decided to put in stone that they weren't going to stand up to bullies, right? They weren't going to stand up to tyranny, and when you do that, you're asking for a fight. And so I'm currently going through Jefferson's letters and notes, when he writes about the war, and I know we Americans sort of like praise it as sort of like this great moment in time, but it wasn't for them, right? It wasn't. They weren't seeking to leave the sort of the empire. They weren't seeking that at all, right? They actually, and that's why. So Lincoln has this line where, sorry, not Lincoln. Jefferson has this line where he goes, "This war is really sad because it's not a joyful war. It's not like because no war ever really is, right? But more so because it was brother killing brother, right? Because they were Englishmen. They were still Englishmen. The Union hadn't become the Union. They weren't a separate nation yet. They were still Englishmen, and it was Englishmen killing Englishmen, and that hurt, right? That hurt, and that sort of mirrors the Civil War too, right? Because again, it was Americans killing Americans, right? And again, sure, they seceded, but it was still one nation, right? The secession wasn't officially approved, right? And it was brothers killing brothers, and there's a tragedy to that that's beyond sadness, right? Anyways, that's that. And that's the revolution, and they win, and it's great. And again, sort of in the foundations of this country, it's a great victory. It's a great moral victory, but it's not a complete moral victory, obviously, because women don't have the same sort of rights that men that landed white men have. Black people don't have. Black people are enslaved. Poor white people are in a bad situation, and sort of like. But again, we're stumbling towards our ideals, right? We're stumbling forward, and again, it wasn't that everybody in Congress at that time was like, yeah, slavery, right? There was debate, but again, as it occurs, right, with sort of debate, as it is even occurring right now, is that we're gonna disagree, and we're gonna put stuff to a vote, and you know what, the quote unquote what we would call good guys lost. The people who were anti-slavery, they lost, right? They lost the vote, right? People chose to see their slaves as property and treat them as such, and it wasn't everybody. And that's worth knowing, is that again, once you go through a bloody revolutionary war like that, you want to avoid it at all costs, right? And then they've just killed their Englishmen, right? And they've lost people too. They weren't quite ready to start another war, right? And then when you're not ready to start another war, you compromise, and sometimes you have to compromise with the bad guys, right? But not all the time, right? So the most notable one in sort of modern history is sort of the compromise that Neville Chamberlain made with Adolf Hitler, right? that led to atrocity across a whole continent. Hitler was a bad guy, but beyond that, he was evil, right? But again, so and that's the thing, right? And slavery, yes, slavery was evil, and slavery is evil because it still goes on here in some places, right? So slavery is evil, and we compromise with evil, right? And because we just fought a bloody war, and the same thing happened in World War II, right? So again, let's give Chamberlain some slack here, is that the first Great War was just about what 20 something years ago at that point. Yeah, and when that happens, it's still fresh in your mind, right? It's still fresh. The wounds still there, you're still healing, and as such, you want to avoid war again. So maybe you let evil slip, and then you have atrocity, and you go, whew, maybe not so much anymore. But anyways, we're moving it around, but that's okay. So the revolution was, let's fight tyranny, and then we get into what is America's next great sort of like sort of ethos, right? Let's go west. Let's explore. This is most notably captured in Polk's Manifest Destiny. Again, that's a highfalutin way of saying it, like sort of like a highbrow way of like, yeah, it's our destiny to go conquer the West. But again, it wasn't really destiny. It was more like, we're Americans and we like to go check stuff out. and the way the people from the Mayflower left England here, again, like, so what happens is that you have old money on the coast, right? Because again, you have slavery in the South. If you have land, you have land. Again, so young people didn't really have opportunity, right? Because again, like there's vested interest, there's like old money, there's no room for growth really, and it's like, you know what, we're gonna go pioneer the West. We're gonna go where there's open land and there's space, and we can plant our crops, we can build our own homesteads. One of my favorite cities in the country, Seattle, was founded by Well, some pioneers, right? Started on Alki Beach, and then some people moved to Pioneer Square, and then that's how. And Seattle, the history of Seattle is fascinating because it was built by pioneers, right? And because again, and there were broke people from the Midwest and the East Coast who were like, you know what, we don't have opportunity here, we don't have access here, we don't have opportunity, so we're gonna go, right? We're gonna go west and see what we can do. And you know what? On the way, we're gonna, because the Oregon Trail, right? Like, there's a lot of death, there's a lot of carnage. Most people who took the journey died, and then when they got there, they had to face off against the native population, and then there were many wars. People died. You know, the settling of the West wasn't easy. It was hard won, and I think, and that's why I really like enjoy past generations, because I don't know, they had to struggle against the sort of the unknown, right? Every generation has sort of had to struggle. Most generations have had to struggle against something, and I think we have our struggle now. My fellow young people, we have, and our struggle, yes, is sort of the legislature and their ilk, right? Because again, we might see Trump as sort of the guy, but again, think about it, right? There was an impeachment, and then there was a vote in the Senate, right? And then the cowards still decided not to vote him out. So they are a target, right? The fact is that we're dealing with legislatures who are in there for the wrong reasons and not being able to carry their duties, and that's our great challenge, right? And if we can't stand up to it like adults, then you know what? We're never going to become adults, right? And that's the cool thing about, and that was the go west period, right? So that's when America sort of grew up, right? America started growing up when it went west, right? Because again, it had to combat the wilderness. And actually, it started growing up when it fought the Revolutionary War, but actually, that's when it was born, right? They started growing up when it went west, and then it had a big decision to make, and that this is where my favorite president comes in, right? This is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln comes in here because again, the decision to go west is now, it's a big decision, right? And it's like, okay, so we have a big chunk of the population, sort of below the Mason Dixie line, that says that we have slavery, and we approve of that. And then the North, they're not for that. And so the question then becomes, as we move west, are we just going to split the country in half, or are we going to come to some sort of a decision of how we see the slavery thing? And then, okay, so what do we do, right? Again, we fought a war. There was the French American War, I think, that happened during that sort of the period before that. There's some other wars too. So again, war is still fresh in the mind, and again, war is a little bloodier then, because again, people are fighting with swords, and sort of like, the means of killing it is not as rapid and fast, and sort of, and it's when you kill a man back then, you really kill him, right? And so it's not, it's quite, war is fresh in the minds of people, in the sense that it's actually quite visceral, right? As opposed to now, where it's not as, well, I don't know, actually I don't know, for some people it's still very visceral, but it's more visceral back then, right? There were no drone strikes, there's no gas, it's like it was people in World War One, too, right? And World War Two, a very bloody war, because it was trench warfare. It's sort of like man on man. And Vietnam was sort of like, guerrilla. So again, so I guess that's why a lot of the Vietnam people are sort of like very anti-war too, right? Because war in the time before sort of like drones, right, was something that when it happened, you understand that it's something you want to avoid. Anyways, so the question then is, how do we go west? Do we just split the country in half, or do we talk about it? And so we try to talk about it in the legislature, and it's dragging. It's taking a long time. It's hard to convince the South, because again, the legislature has to make the choice, and there's a lot of debate going on, and they can't come to a decision. And to abolish it right away wouldn't work, because again, you don't know what's going to happen in the public. Like again, it's you have a lot of landed South people in the South who have weapons and stuff. You don't know what's going to happen, so you try and do it civilly, right? You try and do a lot of backdoor deals, which Lincoln tried to do, but that didn't work. And then the South, in their vast wisdom, chooses to secede, and that's when the war begins, right? Because they made a choice, and Lincoln said, no, nope, I want to preserve the Union, and that means something, right? That the choice to preserve the Union was a big difference. That led to a really bloody war, again, Americans for Americans. And what's cool is, it's not cool, but it's rather interesting, is that so the period that preceded the Civil War was very romantic, romantic in the sense that America was slowly taking its place in the world, right? And so they were being influenced by a lot of thinkers from England, and sort of the industrial age, and because the industrial age in England led to a lot of rebirth of romanticism, and sort of people craving nature, and so you had romantic poets. You had like you had romantic writers. You know, you had Emerson, you had Whitman, and you had like the Transcendentalists, right? And that was going on. But when after the war happens, people are chastened, right? And that's sort of when pragmatism sort of starts to develop, which is saying that okay, yes, abolishing slavery was a good idea, but again, losing a lot of people in warfare is a bad idea. So how do you sort of achieve your high ideals without killing a lot of people, right? And that's sort of the issue I'm sort of having with quote unquote socialism and communism right now. It's like everybody wants to redistribute capital and stuff. It's like, well, okay, how do you do that without? How do you achieve your high ideals without massacring a whole lot of people, right? And that's sort of like that's because again, once a war happens, it's etched into your body, right? And if you're a human being of some empathy and some compassion, you realize that it's something you want to avoid moving forward. So America comes out of World War II, out of the Civil War chasing, and it starts to reconstruct. Unfortunately, Lincoln is killed before the journey through the reconstruction can really begin, and America goes into the war stage. And I don't really know much about this period, so I'm not going to spend much time here. But I just want to highlight two sort of things on this period. This is sort of the time where sort of the railroads begin, industry starts. You know, Rockefeller, Carnegie, so the connection of the country with railroads, and even this, and then we have immigrant labor coming in, and sort of the mistreatment of like minorities and all the stuff propagates, and and then Jim Crow. Jim Crow actually begins a little bit later afterwards, but again, the Klan, there's still a lot of injustice going on in the country, right? But now it's sort of it's called the Gilded Age too, right? And sort of it's for for a reason where it's like that's where America's new wealth sort of begins, right? Because Rockefeller's new money, Henry Ford's new money, Thomas Edison's new money, blah, on and on, right? And that's in Carnegie. That's sort of where they have their time, right? But again, gilded over, and that's the Gilded Age because that's where wealth sort of new wealth really begins, right? Well, and then oil, all that stuff. But again, it covers up sort of the underlying sort of atrocities going on. People are getting lynched in the South. People are getting like it's still a lot of atrocity going on, but it's I'm using this term for my own use now, but it's gilded over, right? But anyways, you have that going on, but then arises a champion, right? So when you have all these industry titans rise up, somebody has to rise up to check them, right? And that's sort of where Teddy Roosevelt sort of comes in and the muckrakers and sort of like okay, so and sort of like labor, right? So again, so you have capital rising up, right, and sort of this titans of industry, and so what you have is like labor needs a champion, right, and so sort of Teddy rises up, and sort of like and the unions and all those things, and some trust busting stuff happens, and that's all well and good, right, but again, I think you need sort of the compromise. You need new wealth because again, people get a lot of jobs, people can move into cities, and that brings its own issues, but again, people can leave bad situations, and that sort of like leads the way sort of from the migration north, right, because again, there are more jobs, people need money, people can actually leave, right, and again, it wasn't equal treatment for everybody, and minorities still didn't have it. Well, women still couldn't vote for a while there, but again, but it's the progress. So sort of this new money sort of brings in new progress, but again, brings in new problems as well, and that's the beauty of America, and that's also the need for a strong legislature, right? And men and women of character in there, because men and women of character in positions of authority, such as the legislature and the executive and the judges and the judiciary, help us navigate tumultuous periods, and that's what America is, right? So when you have entrepreneurship beginning, you go into a period of chaos, right? It becomes a period of tumult, right? And people get hurt by tumult and chaos because again, the people on the ground, we're not really privy to what's going on in the back rooms, right? We don't really have authority and power, and we don't have capital. We don't have resources. So we need good legislatures and good people in authority to help us navigate this period. And that's sort of what happens with Teddy, and Teddy sort of helps preserve the national parks and sort of the sort of the eroding effects of industry, and he does a pretty good job. And then sort of like that period sort of ends, and then the First Great War happens, and Woodrow Wilson sort of after that war establishes the League of Nations, and that's sort of the precursor to the UN. And the idea there is that okay, we as a globe, right? Well, and that's the thing about Europe that's so fantastic is that Europe is this huge powder keg, right? Because there's so many people there and so many different cultures and different ideas of how society should work, and they're gonna clash, right? Okay, and America, which is like isolated by ocean and and until like the invention of the airplane, and you take like ocean liner a while to get here. So America was sort of protected, but this war sort of brings America into the world stage, and we have this is where the McKinley color, or is it there's a corollary to something Roosevelt said, and it's that sort of America sort of has this role here where like it's not isolationist. It is isolated thanks to the oceans, not anymore, but again, it's isolated, yes, distance wise. It was isolated distance wise, but it has an obligation to have its navy outside, which says that we're gonna be. I think Roosevelt said it was the world's policeman, right? But it's like we're gonna pay attention to the world affair because again, if you're a compassionate human being and you somehow don't understand the fact that, but you also think America shouldn't deal in other countries' affairs, but then you complain about the fact that people are dying in foreign countries, then I don't know. I think you have your priorities sort of backwards, right? You espouse certain values, but you don't live up to them because it's a hard call, right? Because it's I don't know because you can't hold two sort of separate ideas in your head that to in fact be compassionate. Sometimes you have to use your quote unquote authority, right? And 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 that sort of bothers me. And although I've chosen to be a Democrat, I'm a very reluctant Democrat because I think progressives are sometimes very childish about their approach to dealing with the world. It's like Teddy Roosevelt was a progressive. Are you kidding me? But Teddy Roosevelt again, because Teddy Roosevelt went west and he sort of grew up with the Rough Riders and sort of like in dealing with like I don't know some rough stuff, And again, he was a bit of an egomaniac, but again, so was Churchill, right? Beginning without Churchill, I don't know how World War II would have gone, right? So, anyways, so World War One sort of ends, and then again, due to sort of the state of the world and sort of how the German people are sort of treated, it leaves room for someone like Hitler to rise. And then this is another time where America sort of, again, like I've said previously, they showed up late to the game, right? And I don't know why. I need to look into it. But again, like I said, the past is opaque. But America sort of stands up for what it is, right? Which is like again against tyranny in the that Hitler was perpetuating, and the other Axis powers, that was good. Again, it might have gone a bit too far with bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And yeah, I don't think that was necessary, but again, you can't fix the past. And then and and I don't need to delve much into this because I think we can all agree that was a just thing to do was to step in there. But what really sucks is that after the Second Great War, Second World War, America sort of the woman helped in the war effort, and then African Americans helped in the war effort. So other minorities, but again, they come back to America and they're treated like second class citizens again, and that I don't know exactly if it's a sort of like a direct lead into that, but I mean then the civil rights movement sort of happens, but again it sort of is right because again the big generation I don't really know how to capture it because okay so I missed a little bit of the literature there, but there was the lost generation that happened before Second World War, and then after that generation, sort of the Beat generation, sort of this, and then we talk about the hippies and stuff. But like, I mean, yeah, because the and that was a renaissance, right? That was a renaissance, right? And that was a direct response to the fact that there were although we had done this thing of great justice in the foreign land, we come back to our nation and we're still perpetuating our own atrocities, right? Which is staggering to the human mind. And but anyways, so you have this time after, which for me is probably like one of the best periods of American history because the beats rise up, the civil rights movement happens, Kennedy comes runs for office, and he has his own new frontier movement, and it's like, wow, it's like America. It's like America's shining hope, right? This is America. This is America probably at its finest, right? In recent history, right? It's America saying, yes, we have taken our place in the war. We have ended this great war, and you know what? We're going to give our people the freedom they have, the freedom they need, and and we're gonna protect. We're gonna reach for the stars, and while we do that, we're gonna take care of our people on the ground. We're gonna give them voting rights. That we're gonna try and make life a little better, and then atrocity strikes again, right? Jeff gets killed, Robert Kennedy is killed, MLK is killed, Malcolm X is killed, right? And then we're sort of thrust into this period of chaos again. And then we enter, and the Cold War sort of continues, and we enter Vietnam, we enter Korea, and then and then sort of that's that. And but again, the Berlin Wall does in fact go down in that period. But again, it's still there's still sort of this weird tension in the country, right? It's not we're not quite settled yet, right? And then sort of we get into so this I'm sort of going to gloss. I need to look more into this period, and again, but this is just me just highlighting, right? But I think the key point I'm trying to make is the 60s and the sort of the 50s, 60s, 70s, right? Sort of presented this opportunity for great actually the 50s and 60s, right? Sort of presented this opportunity for America at its finest, and we sort of lost that. But again, it didn't all go away, right? So we sort of had this that generation was sort of filled with this idea of what America needs to be, right? And a lot of them went into the academy and the universities, and sort of like that's why I don't know I get along well with people from that time period because I don't know they were there and so they understand, right? They carry within them the actual legacy of that. And for me, that's sort of where I spend a lot of my time is like MLK and JFK and a lot of the beat writers like Kerouac's one of my favorite, and then Albert Camus too, who's in France, but he also espoused this idea, and that's sort of like, and that's sort of where the great debate sort of began, right? Which is okay, so how should we organize our economic society? So because again, that's what sort of what Hitler wrote on, right? That's what like the Axis powers, right? Wrote on, right? It's a lot of fascism, and then even our allies, the Russians, their economic system with us too was kind of flawed too. Well, not in agreement with ours too, right? And that's sort of when this great debate sort of began, right? It was like, okay, also obviously preceded by Marx when he wrote it, sort of 18, sort of like post Nietzsche, like sort of in the same time, and it's like, okay, the great debate then begins, right? So while the Cold War is happening, right, in sort of the forefront, there's this academic debate going on, right, which is like, okay, who is right in this whole situation here, right? How should we in fact distribute capital and resources, right? Should we and again the academy sort of loses its head, right? Because in the sense that and sort of the way I see this argument sort of is Sartre and Camus, right? So I've spent a lot of time with Camus, and thus I have to spend time with Sartre. And Camus and Sartre represent two poles, in my opinion. And again, so people criticize Camus for not being, I don't know, sort of having like a sort of like a positive. By positive, I mean by a surefire solution on how to sort of navigate all this. Camus was mostly just like, if I had to wrap him up in the most pedantic way possible, I would say Camus was like, can we just like kind of like figure it out? Can we just like have some solitude and solidarity? By that I mean, let's all try and figure it out together while like giving each other the individual freedom. That's Camus, and again, that sounds simplistic, right? But it's not. But Sartre was of the notion that if we have to kill a few million like people to get to our glorious revolution, why not? And that's where for me the line is drawn, right? The line is drawn for me where you cease to value human life, and that's where Camus sort of like has my heart, right? Is that he valued human life, and no sensible American who actually says that they agree with some of the founding of this country, going back to the revolution, right, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, can tell me that a few million lives is not worthy of consideration, right? You can't tell me that and still hold your head up as an American in the academy. But anyways, that's sort of what the academy sort of loses its head. So you have this Cold War going on, and the academy is losing its head. And there are a few victories in that Cold War time. The Berlin Wall goes down, and Bush Senior avoids a few wars, and Reagan's, it represents something that's quite worth thinking about. I mean, so trickle-down economics is, obviously we know the BS and the flaws of that. But again, it was sort of like I don't know much about it, and I'll look more into that. So there are two periods I didn't know quite much about, which is the Reconstruction and the World Stage, and the Cold War and the War on Terror, right? Which I'm going to get into soon. But so you have Reagan rising up, right, with his like economic system of like capital leading the way. Again, but if you think about it, the way I'm thinking about it, it's sort of like a strong response, right, to its opposition, right, and sometimes you need to make a strong stand. I think that's what it was. But again, Cold War was filled with a lot of atrocities, and then you sort of have that period sort of ends, and we go into sort of the 90s, and because again, so you have Bush Senior is preceded by not preceded, sorry, he's preceded, he's followed by Clinton. And so that's why we get into the sort of that's the beginning of the so I don't quite know much about the war on terror and sort of the Middle Eastern affair, sure, but that's sort of where that begins, right? Not entirely. So some of it begins with Bush, right, and sort of like what we did in the Middle East, because again that was sort of like again the Cold War and sort of our dealings with the Russians, right, sort of led into that. But again, that sort of leads into when you start messing around with other people's countries again, which I think we should do, right? But again, do it with delicacy, because again, there's going to be a response, right? Anyways, we'll get into Clinton and we sort of get this war on drugs and the war on which was again started by Clinton, again started by Nancy Reagan and all that stuff. But again, that was sort of like, and then we have, but that sort of led to this mass incarceration that happened in the 90s and sort of like, sort of like an erosion of sort of like, not a complete erosion, but like a big time erosion of the black population, right? And sort of like this heavy mistreatment that sort of happens, right? And it's really tragic. But again, we get some phenomenal rap and hip hop from it, right? Which sort of I think is sort of like the next big boom. So we have the Chicago Renaissance that happens, sorry, the Harlem Renaissance that happens in the 20s, sort of following the first Great War, sort of happens in that period with sort of the Lost Generation, Hemingway, and those guys, and then after the Second World War, you sort of have the Harlem Renaissance, which happens sort of like again in cohesion with sort of the Beat generation. That's in Chicago. That's the Chicago Renaissance, and then you sort of have this Renaissance again that happens with the rap and rap folks in the 90s. It's kind of awesome. But again, while I love great art, I don't think that it's worth. If I had to choose, like sort of relative, like people not dying en masse, or like great art that comes from it, I would choose not having people die en masse. But yeah, so that period happens, and then the big one, right? So 9/11 happens, and that changes the whole country, right? That sort of like that sort of is a sort of a wake up call for a generation, and I think we botched that. I think we didn't handle that very well, and that's. I'm not gonna get into that because again, not right now, because that's something that needs to be handled delicately, right? Because again, that's the situation where a nation decides to assault your nation and kill your citizens, right? And that demands a response, right? I don't know, is it a Nietzsche quote that says that pain demands a response, and then pain does demand a response, but you do it well so that you don't lose more citizens. And so a war that started in 2001 has lasted till now, right? And it's like it's messy, it's slow, but again, like it's not been all bad because there had to be a response to that, right? And and so that's led into to more discussions in our sort of covered up our national dialogue, right? Where we talk about the war and sort of like, okay, why are we in these foreign countries when we don't have things quite right in America, and so like and again, and it's making us rethink America's role in the world, right? And that's phenomenal, right? We're going back in time, right? Because not even going back in time, but like the old conversations never stopped happening, right? And that's how a nation is, right? A nation is this constant dialogue between what should we do, right? And that's why citizens need to pay attention, right? Obligations go beyond voting, right? Obligations are being part of the conversation. But again, being part of the conversation isn't rather enough facts. It's being able to say, okay, who are we as a people, right? And what does that mean? And that's why I'm doing this particular podcast here. So I think who we are as a people are the people who say no to tyranny, but then say, okay, go have fun, go explore, go discover, go build. But again, not at the cost of people on the ground, right? Because again, people have said that we're going through sort of a new industrial revolution. That's fine, and jobs are sort of changing, the nature of work is changing, and that's all well and good. But again, we have an opportunity here to do it right, right? We've seen it happen in different guises a few times, right? But we have an opportunity here to finally, not finally, but to make it better, right? We have an opportunity to do it well, to do it better, and I think we're squandering that. But again, I think that if we actually tried harder, we can, and that would mean talking to each other, right? And that's something that we don't seem to be doing very much of right now, which is okay. It's not okay, but it's okay in the sense that it just takes one, right? It takes well, no, just take one, but it takes one to begin it, right? And so this is my sort of my putting my hat in the ring, right? And so like, hey, I'm a Democrat and a Republican who wants to have a conversation that's sort of, I don't know, for the benefit of, okay, so who are we as a people? How do we advance as a people? I'll gladly talk to you. And maybe we start something. Maybe we start a series of conversations that changes how we will sort of look at the world. I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But yeah, anyway, so the war on terror happens, and then a new hope. I call Barack Obama the new hope because at the time, actually, which is very funny, when I first moved to America, that's all the time Barack was running for president. I didn't quite buy into him because again, I was a child, I didn't know what I was talking about, but I sort of had my metrics for decision making, and it was sort of like John McCain had served in a war and was a prisoner of war and he come through it. And Barack, he was a young guy who hadn't really served in sort of a military capacity, and I thought that was like the pinnacle of service. And and then I chose McCain, but again, McCain then made a bad choice. He chose Sarah Palin as his VP, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not just gonna pay attention. I don't really, it doesn't really affect me, so I'm just gonna stay out of it. And Barack won, and Barack tried his best, but again, there was this whole partisan stuff, right? Which is not what the legislature is for, right? That happens, and so it derails him, man, and it sort of culminates in what I would call the Trump era, which is what we're living in now. We're living in the time of Trump. And the time of Trump is chaos. It's a time of upheaval. But again, like I said, times of upheaval give us an opportunity. They give us an opportunity to rise beyond what we expected, right? And there's an interesting personality that I've forgotten his name, but there's a football player. After the Walter Center hit the building, he left the comfort of his NFL position and his money and all that stuff, and he went to go serve his country. And unfortunately, he was killed in friendly fire. But again, that's sort of what pain demands. Pain doesn't. So when Trump was elected, some idiots in Chicago when they go scream at the Trump Tower, like that would solve it. But again, because they're right, pain demands a response, right? But again, the people in their 20s, they don't need to like be given a bottle and pat on the back, right? They need to say, okay, how do I take my place now? So the gauntlet has been thrown, right? So Trump is the Trump era is the gauntlet. That's our generation's gauntlet. Like, for my Democrats, this is the gauntlet. Trump is the gauntlet, right? So not just Trump, but the sort of the Republican ethos of just siding with Trump, just going with everything Trump is saying. That's the chaos that Trump and his ilk are inducing. That's the gauntlet, right? And then how are you going to respond to it? Again, if your response is to scream at a building or to whine on the couch or like any of that stuff, then you know who I'm looking for, and it's okay, and I'm probably not who you're looking for as well. So that's okay, and then so, and finally to close, Trump is in fact representative of the American spirit, right? Because again, he's a fast talking, quote unquote rich man, right? That's America. America is and again, and the sort of the people who voted for Trump were that the discontent was vastly underrated, and you know what, they had a point, right? They had a point. America had sort of forgotten about them. The economy was changing and they were being forgotten. I think Biden said once that they should go learn to code, and like, oh, that's insensitive as all hell, right? And my candidate for president, Andrew Yang, got it right. He started a company called Venture for America, which goes to these blighted areas and tries to develop new business there. And that's why Andrew Yang was the guy. Even John Kasich too, right? Kasich understood the discontent, right? He's a governor. He was a governor from Ohio, and he's from Middle America. And he saw the discontent, but again, he didn't have the Trump swagger, because if you don't think Trump has swagger, then you're not paying attention, right? Trump is a fast talking, gunslinging guy, and he's good at that. But again, because again, he embodies that part of the ethos, but he doesn't embody the say no to tyranny. He can talk a good game, right? And he said no. Because again, yeah, it's we're living in a time of the tyranny of the experts, like the tyranny of the pundits, the tyranny of the sort of the one percenters, right? And the sort of the tyranny of the globalists, right? That's what we're living in now, and sort of like part of what I want to help do with my company is in fact to usher in what I'm calling the renaissance of the common man, right? Which is sort of I'm calling it's a return to blue collar values, sort of virtue, right? Taking care of home and hearth and family and community, right? But I think we need to respect the what I call white collar sensibilities, which are aesthetics, right? You know, the beauty and sort of like the high ideals, right? Those are very white collar things, right? That's for me. That's what it means to be white collar. It's Thomas Jefferson and sort of his beautiful language of sort of what it means to be a great country, and then Benjamin Franklin, feet on the ground, you know, hanging out with the people, sort of being the man of the people. So that's that. We need a return to Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson working together, not that separation. Right? We need and that's what I want to do. Sort of like a union of Thomas Jefferson and Abraham and Benjamin Franklin. Which honestly, that's what that's what Abraham Lincoln represented. He was sort of this compromise between Franklin and Jefferson, and then for what it's worth, JFK even embodied a bit of that. And for what it's worth, Teddy Roosevelt embodied a bit of that. And for what it's worth, Barack embodies a bit of that, right? Because again, he worked as a community organizer in Chicago, and his life back then was like, I don't know, he was like pretty basic, right? By basic, I'm not in the sense that we use it, but basic is like he didn't live a life of like elegance and luxury, right? And even Michelle, like they didn't live a life of luxury back then, right? It was quite a bit of a struggle, right? So they understand the common man in terms of blue, but they have high values and high standards, and they're standing for the finer things in life. And you know, hell yeah, you know, we should all be able to have an opportunity to have the finer things in life. But again, not handed to us, and no, not handed to us. But yeah, so that's the American spirit as I see it, as told through the American story. And you know, if I miss things out, or if I mess some stuff up, please write me a comment or send me an email to correct me, because I do want to get this right, because I do want to get us back to the fundamentals of what it means to be the union again. Because again, the union is fraying, but again, because we live in relative peace times, and you know what? I don't think we're gonna see a sort of like a call to arms. I don't think so. I don't think we're quite there yet. I don't think we're gonna get there. For many reasons, I know people overuse them, but I think we're a little soft. I don't think anybody's gonna pull a gun on anybody. I don't think anybody's gonna like that. But again, we're having this passive civil war, right, where everybody's entrenched in their camps. I mean, so a few people are being violent, so we have Antifa, but that's just like a very small percentage. And then you have the tiki touch whites, and that's just a very small population. But I mean, and every once in a while you have a tragedy like Dylan Roof, right, and then the club shooting, right, in Florida. You have a few of those, right, but again, and that's the cool, and it's not cool, but that's a good thing about the way that the sort of divide is now. It's sort of like the big cities like the Chicago's, the Atlantas, New York, the Los Angeleses of this world, the San Francisco's, the Seattle's, Portland's, these big cities, then surrounded by. So it's a distributed sort of warfare, which is great. Which means that I don't know, all the 1%ers and like people in the sort of the white collar jobs kind of like band together, you know, and then turn their guns against, because again they're surrounded, right? So it's a little different warfare now. So now I don't think we're gonna actually physically hit each other, but I think it's gonna be more of a battle of the words, which is perfect. I think that's what the 21st century is about. Like we're finally getting to the point where it's like we're gonna have to have debates again, you know, and like not like childish like presidential debates, but like actual real life debates. That's why I love me some Twitter. Twitter is the forum for that. Right? It's not. No, it's not the forum for that. It's a forum for beginning the conversation, right? But then you know this long form podcast like Joe Rogan is really fantastic about it. You know, Sam Harris and Jocko. Jordan Peterson too, like, and I've seen a few other ones, right? It's like those are the ones I've probably paid attention to, but I'm starting to expand, right? It's like we're starting to have these conversations, right? And by having them, we're sort of seeing that, you know, for what it's worth, while we do disagree on some very fringe issues, we sort of share the same general idea of what it means to be an American, right? For the good life, like I mean, so or what Sam Harris may call well-being, right? You know, I just call it like good life. It's just we have a lot of shared things, right? And sort of being able to tolerate each other again, right? Because again, we don't have to like each other. I don't. You don't have to like me. You don't know me. You don't have to like me. But again, you have to be able to tolerate me if we're gonna live together in the union. And I think we need to move towards tolerance. But that's not gonna come easy, right? That's gonna be hard won, right? We're gonna have to pull out our verbal swords, right? And sort of like an iron sharpened iron. We're gonna have to go at it, and I'm sort of grateful for that, because again, I think we've gotten too comfortable, right? And you know what? I think an East win is coming, and I'm kind of excited for it. But anyway, so that's sort of how I see the union. And then finally, to close, I think to preserve and propagate the spirit, I'm really counting on a few groups of people who I think have the highest obligation, right? I think family and community plays a huge role, and community includes whatever house of worship you're in. And for me, I'm a Christian, so it's the church. I think they have a huge obligation, and their family has an immense obligation. Your community centers, they have, your libraries, huge obligations. But then your entertainers also, like your Dave Chappelle's, your Kevin Hart's, your Rogan's, all this, and even your pundits. Like for me, I like the Nassim Taleb and so the Real World Risk Institute, and the lady named Rachel Brown and John and Pressure. Like your pundits that you like, and your sort of your sense makers, or you like your entertainers, and even your entrepreneurs like Paul Graham, Elon Musk, Navarro. Like they have a huge obligation because people are listening to them. Because again, they're cool. They've done stuff, and they're kind of exciting. They're clever and they're funny and they're smart. Peterson, like people like that, and they're worth listening to. So entertainers and entrepreneurs and pundits, and you guys have a high obligation because you guys help us dissect stuff. And family and community, you have a really really important obligation too of inculcating this into the future generation. But most of all, teachers, my teachers, because everybody educates in some way or the other, but people in formal roles as teachers, I think you have the highest obligation. Because again, you're not quite entertainer and you're not quite family and community, but you're a bit of both. You're the middle ground. So to close, and so my next series might be about this. I'm not quite sure yet, but I see the university not as a place to go get ready to get a job. I see the university as a place where the university primary actually falls from high school to the end of your university formal education, right? Some people go to grad school, but again, from ninth grade to the end of university, I think that's the American rite of passage. It's a long gestation period, but then every teacher there has an obligation, and their obligation there is to teach you how to be a citizen, and obviously then prepare you for your particular specialty that you're going to use to contribute to the country. But they're supposed to prepare you to be a citizen. And what they have to do for that is that they're going to bring in the world, which is what the entertainers and entrepreneurs are about, right? The business people and the finance people. Also, they're in the world doing things. And then the teachers need to bring that in, but they also need to let you bring in whatever your traditions are. Because again, a lot of traditions, there's a lot of fantastic stuff, but there's a lot of bullshit too, right? So they're going to bring in the world and bring in who you are, and then they're going to grind you down, right? They're going to grind you down until you're like your formidable citizen, right? And again, you don't have to agree with my ideas. You don't have to agree with my thought process. You don't have to agree, but there needs to be a baseline level of rigor in the way we engage each other. And the classroom is the dojo. It's the meeting ground. It's the battleground. But I call it the dojo because it's not the battleground. It's the preparation for the actual battleground. Life, the world, is the battleground. But the classroom is the dojo, and the good teacher, in my opinion, simulates that. So maybe I will go into that for my next, because I'm writing a book on sort of my vision of the academy, and that will sort of lead into that actually. So yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I don't know what I had planned for my next series, but I think I'm really going to go into the obligation of the academy, of the university. So this and actually from ninth grade to sort of the end of university, which is this long gestation period of grinding you down into a formidable citizen. And I had a longer gestation period because I went to graduate school, and so yeah, I had my 4 years of high school, my 5 years of undergrad, my 2 years of my master's, my 2 years of my beginning my PhD. That's a long gestation period of just grinding me down. I may not have the same things as my peers, but I'm ready. I'm ground down as a citizen, and I have my tools. I just need to find a way to actually get the resources I need. But yeah, anyway, so that's today's episode. Today's episode really is I wanted to share with you my understanding of the American spirit as informed by the history. Because again, if you make a claim as to what your country stands for, but your country's history doesn't align with that, then you're lying. But the American history is aligned with its spirit, and I'm quite proud of that. And I think, and again, I think the highest obligation falls upon entertainers, entrepreneurs, and pundits, the sort of high flyers, and family and community. You play a huge role too. But teachers, you're the one who takes those two things and sort of grinds them together. You grind them together to make formidable citizens, and together, and that's how we preserve the spirit of union as a collective. I hope you've enjoyed. And the next podcast will come out again on next Sunday, and I hope you look forward to that. I'll sort of wrap up this sort of the series on the nation. I'll sort of go into how then. So I talked about the spirit of the union. So I'm going to talk about specifically how that spirit informs the obligations and rights and luxury of individuals and societal members and the government. Anyways, have a lovely Sunday, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.